Well, let's get to our first topic today. Nigeria's headline inflation maintained its upward trend as it rose to 20.52% in August 2022 on a year-on-year basis, making it its highest in 17 years. The headline inflation has risen steadily in the last 9 months, a development that forced the central bank to raise the nation's benchmark interest rate, the monetary policy rate, by 250 basis points from 11.5% to 14% between April and July this year. However, depreciation of the local currency, disruptions in the food products, and increase in cost of production has been described as part of the facts behind the latest increase. Well, let's analyze this further, and joining me to do this via Zoom is Professor Ken Ife. He's a London Enterprise Ambassador, Chief Economic Strategist at ECOWAS Commission, as well as a development economist. Professor Ken Ife, good afternoon, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, I know the increase in inflation didn't come to you as a surprise, but for you, what is your take with regards to the increase that we actually witnessed? Were you thinking we'll get something more or less than what we have? And are we going to continue with this trend as we move to the end of the year?
Well, I don't expect this to be the highest you will get. Because why? Is when you look at, if you disaggregate the data for states, you see that the states like Kwara State is recording 31%, Bonny 28%, Rivers 27%. So if some of these states are well above this average of 20.52, then it tells you, although there are some that are well below, like Jigawa 17.7 and Zamfara Oyo 19.8, but quite a good number of states are well above this average, so which shows that we'll not come to the end of it. But one thing, though, is that even though there was an increase based on this period last year of 20.52, but when you look at month-to-month increase, there is actually a decrease relative to the previous months in the same period. So what that tells you is that because we are in farming season, the food is coming out. Secondly, the petrol circumstance has normalized a bit because one of them was scarcity of petrol and then high price of petrol. But the thing is that, and diesel, of course, the thing is that even the diesel price is coming down slightly. The petrol queue have disappeared. So all of those have reduced the hike in the price of in those commodity prices, as you could see from month to month. That's why. But overall, still we are still in very high region.
I'm also seeing that there's still have increases in price of gas, liquid fuel, passenger travel, of course, by road and by air. All of this will definitely have an impact on this figure. But let me ask, are we to see something like a reduction when it comes to price of food? Like you mentioned that it's the season, of course, farming season. But what are we expecting with regards to price of food stuff? We still have insecurity on one side. Farmers say they have to even pay to get to their farms.
You know, the insecurity, of course, is very, very crucial to the inflationary pressures we are having, especially around food. And so that hasn't abated, although I know that the continuous rainfall and the swampy environment are making it more difficult for them to strike. And you could even hear stories about quite a lot of them disengaging in this Sambisa forest. So, but that notwithstanding, the other areas of concern are, of course, the imported inflation part of it due to currency situations where we have. So all the imported raw materials and food stuff and other items are just passing through to the consumer. So the inflation is continuing to be high, and you can actually see that from this is the second month that the urban inflation sub-index has actually exceeded the composite price index. They usually stay well below by 3% or more to 5%, or 3% to 5%. But now they have actually gone ahead, ahead of that, What that tells you is that not only that the urban area is the theater of inflation, but much of the things that are differentially consumed in the urban city, like transporting things from rural to urban, imported materials and imported goods that are consumed in the urban area, all of them are trending up. So that is the theater. Urban area is the theater of inflation. But that being said, that the rural inflation is also below at 20.12, it's still below the 20.52, but still a lot less than the urban inflation. So the overall, but the core inflation has remained reasonably, is around 17.24%. So that has still stayed down, because core inflation is all indices minus food sub-basket index. So that has still stayed within range.
Prof, let's touch on the global effect now. Despite the fact that, grains are to be moved, but many still see that the global disruption, one way or the other, is affecting movement of goods and services one way or the other, raw materials and all of that. Do we see any impact of this also moving on as we go in the year?
Well, the release of grains, especially wheat, from Russia, China, and the Ukrainian axis, the shipments have all come out. A lot of them are coming out. So that has reduced the sharp rises in the price of wheat. And then, of course, we could see that in the bread that we consume and many other confectionaries and biscuits and things that are based on wheat products. So we've seen some reduction coming out there. And then also, we do expect to see some impact on imported material, because don't forget, areas like Europe, that 40% of their gas are coming from the Russian region, they are experiencing very high costs of input costs. So that is going to affect the things we are importing from them. We are still an import-dependent economy. So for that reason, anything that we import is also affected by the production factors, the factors of production, which include high cost of energy and all of that. Of course, if it is food-related material, we're also importing some of those that are going to be affected by the high price of wheat and some other things like there are some other grains. Some oil, for example, a huge volume of some oil comes from Ukraine, and that price has gone through the roof. So that has a knock-on effect. So the answer is that, yeah, things are coming out and they are gradually tempering the sharp rises in prices, but we just hope that there will be more compensation. But when you have a major attack on a particular line of trade, what then happens is that substitute items, people go and invest in substitute items. So over this nearly 8 months of this crisis, people have begun to grow other substitute crops. For example, you remember, a lot of these grains and which are used in biofuel, bioethanol production. So now there's a heavy demand on our cassava, because cassava, Nigeria produces 25 to 30% of world cassava, and we do more than 62 million metric tons. So we're having a lot of orders now for dry cassava to be imported outside, and they give a much higher yield of bioethanol than any other item. It gives about 350 liter per metric ton of dry cassava. The wet cassava gives you about 150 to 160 liter per metric ton of wet cassava. So yeah, we are benefiting in a way, but not as much as to compensate for the other things that are pushing prices and input costs.
Interesting stuff. Let's take this conversation, look at another perspective of it now. That's talking about fiscal and monetary support one way or the other, which is needed. But I want to stay with the monetary side. Analysts have argued that we don't need to throw monies at some of these problems, that there are other ways that we can address some of these challenges, like creating jobs, empowering MSMEs, other than borrowing. Many of them see these monies as free monies. We know what's happening with the anchor borrower scheme. So people not wanting to return the money to the central bank, and this will affect new borrowers. What do you make of the efforts? What's your assessment of the efforts made by the Apex Bank, particularly throwing money at some of these issues?
I wish I can describe it as throwing money. It's just an unfair way of describing this. Who is throwing what money? That this is not government money, for goodness sake. Government is not putting the 1 trillion naira that central bank has put in anchor borrowers program since 2017. It is not public money, it is not government money. This money is from banks. Is a combination of the cash reserve ratios of these banks, over 4 trillion, sitting in the vaults of central bank and not earning them any interest. And by mutual agreement with them, they are rolling them out, some of them out to lend. It is money from increase of their loan to deposit ratio from 55 to 65%, pushing more money into the private sector domain. It's money coming from the 5% tax on the profit of commercial banks that come together into an SME fund for them to learn. So it's private sector money. It's my money and your money. But people are crying more than the bereaved by making it feel sensational statements, making it feel that money is going down the drain. That is not money going down the drain, for goodness sake. Look at NNPC. We are going to borrow 500 billion naira every month to subsidize the operations of NNPC. Why? That's where you should be talking to the government that is borrowing that money. And then you have a case now that they are now asking us to use, I mean, there's no comparison at all. And so we should show that, and if we didn't have this level of investment in agriculture, then there would have been more people dying in this country out of starvation than all this whole thing about insecurity and COVID put together. So I think we need to put it in the proper perspective so that people will understand where all this is coming from. It's you and me that own the money that is being lent to these people, these farmers. If the farmers are not returning them, and I believe they're beginning to pay back. The private sector anchors have over 90% of them paid back. It's only these community commodity cooperatives that are slow in paying back. But that doesn't mean that they're going to get away, because there are instruments there to recover the money when the bank feels that they've had enough. The instruments are there, legal instruments.
Thank you so much for that clarity, Prof, and making us really understand that point. But let's look at some other structural issues that are also affecting inflation, ease of doing business initiative, and some other things. Of course, you've identified the Russian and Ukraine crisis. As we move towards an election year, let me take the question from another angle now. There will be a surge in circulation of funds all around. Many believe that there will be a lot of funds in the system. Would this have any impact on inflation figures moving ahead?
Well, obviously, excessive money supply also is a traditional way of affecting inflation, that there are more money chasing fewer goods and services. So that's the classic definition of inflation. So all those money supply part of the equation would definitely increase with the political activity and money exchanging hands. A lot of it will come out. What we try to avoid is that let the majority of that money don't become borrowed money from bank to give out, because that is where we have issues. But if what is being given out by bank is going to increase productivity, going into production and increasing productivity, then there's no issue, because it will have the capacity to repair, and then it keeps the economy going and increases aggregate output. But if it is the other way around, just simply pour money into circulation without a commensurate increase in aggregate output, then we have challenges there, and that will definitely affect inflation.
Are you thinking that in as much as we might not want to over-project or under-project, if that is allowed, as we expect the MPC to meet anytime soon, will these inflation figures alter any of decisions made before now?
Well, it's possibly good, because we have to flow. So in one respect, we have to flow with the current, and the current global current is to continue to increase and hike MPR rates. And some of them do so because they have a tighter rein on money supply in those economies. But it's not so much that in our own economy. And the reason why it doesn't have that great connection, America can continue to hike the rates because they know that they are connected, the whole economy is connected. So immediately it will affect the mortgage rates, it will affect so many other rates that are going to be affected, and it could cost money, suck up money from circulation. But our own is not so much because there's a preponderance of structural factors at play in our own inflation calculus. And we know that from the prices that are rising on input costs, the transportation costs, the diesel costs, the all kinds of costs that are coming up and are rising. And our import dependence means also there's so many other imported inflation that are coming in. And there are demand pool inflation coming from over 100 million people surrounding us from Francophone countries that are buying our food because our currency is devalued relative to their own. So they are buying our food is cheap, so they keep on buying all our food stuff, forcing this kind of scarcity that we have. So all of those are not they're not in the purview of monetary policy. And even within the monetary policy, you have very low number that are about nearly 40%, between 33 to 40% that are actually outside the banking sector, don't have bank accounts. And then also over 100% million Nigerians are poor, and then 80 million beyond poverty line. So all of these people that are outside the banking sector, and of course some of our young people have left the banking sector and gone to cryptocurrency. So because of that, you have to now question the effectiveness of monetary policy in terms of reaching out to those that have the money within the banking sector. So that's some of the challenges that we have. So it's possible that the NPR rate might increase for whatever it means, but that does not mean that you're going to find a one-to-one relationship that if you increase it by 2%, that inflation will come down by 1%. No. You don't have that kind of relationship.
Finally, Prof, before I let you go now, I want to take it from the human angle aspect now. Everyone is talking about purchasing power dwindling one way or the other. I personally have not even got an increase in salary, but I'm paying more now for food stuff for all that we're buying at home. So what kind of life will a Nigerian, well, the argument will also be, it looks like it's a global thing, but what life will an average Nigerian live looking at the high cost of everything at the moment?
It's very unfortunate, and it's very, very challenging times for us. So that's why we need to have action on both the demand and supply side of this equation. Because don't forget that inflation is price. So price is always subject to demand and supply. And the key element in that demand and supply equation has always been the forex side because of our import dependence. So what happens is that we have forex, 79% of it is coming from crude, 10% is from gas, and then that means 89% coming from the petroleum sector. And then the remaining 11% or so is what the CBN has access to. In other words, how much FDI can you get in, how much portfolio investment can you get in, and then how much of the other diaspora remittance, all those stuff. But then when NNPC that should be sending about 3 billion every month to CBN to help CBN defray $1.8 billion import bills every month, is only sending them 300 million, which instead of 3 billion. So you can see where it's all stacking up. And then you are an import-dependent economy, so you are constantly looking for that dollar to import to all the frivolous items. And then you see the translation of those tendencies on the trade imbalance between Nigeria and China, which is well over 2 trillion. So all of that are hitting up our destiny and challenging those who have decided to do backward integration and import substitution. They are producing the food, but they are still smuggling the rice from neighboring countries through porous borders. Still smuggling some of these goods, affecting them, buying the cotton in the midnight and taking them away, denying the cotton we are producing to the ginneries and to the garment manufacturers. There are so many contrivances against our monetary and fiscal policy that you just have to wonder how long will we continue like this.
Well, it's a good way to live it. It's a big one there, Prof. How long would we continue like this? Professor Ken Ife is the London Enterprise Ambassador, Chief Economic Strategist at the ECOWAS Commission, as well as a development economist. Prof, thank you for your time. To enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you very much for having me.